Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jessica Byron, and I am the director of the Institute of International Relations. Ambassador Moon-up, members of the diplomatic community, members, government officials, members of the U.W.I community, welcome. And thank you very much for coming out in this rather impressive storm this afternoon to our first diplomatic dialogue for academic year 2018-2019. I would like to extend a very special welcome to Ambassador Moon-up, our keynote speaker this afternoon for this dialogue, and also to the chair of this session, our Professor of Practice, Professor Winston Dukaran, who is also a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Trinidad and Tobago. And so I think that we are in very good hands for this diplomatic dialogue. This is also Ambassador's first visit to the Institute of International Relations. He is a fairly recent arrival, so we are very happy to receive you here for a lecture on your first visit. And I want to say that the Embassy of Korea has been a very significant partner of the Institute of International Relations. We have extremely good relations of cooperation with your embassy, and we are extremely happy to have you with us. It's an auspicious occasion because so much is happening on the Korean Peninsula. There are so many new political initiatives at the moment. And the Republic of Korea is an extremely significant country in terms of global, multilateral, and bilateral relations, that I think for us this is a great opportunity to learn more from an insider's perspective about Korean history, Korean perceptions of the inter-Korean dialogue, and also of global affairs. This year, the Institute, in its diplomatic dialogues, is focusing very much on the Asia-Pacific region. So we think this is an area that we perhaps do not pay sufficient attention to in our curriculum, and we are striving to correct that as far as possible. And one of those areas in which we are making such a correction is in the area of diplomatic dialogues. So Ambassador Moon-up is the first of a series of presenters from the Asia-Pacific region in our diplomatic dialogues this year. So once again, I welcome the ambassador, and I welcome all of you, and we look forward to a very stimulating exchange. I hand over at this point to Professor Dukaran, who will be chairing the proceedings. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much, Professor or Director, and I share our sentiments to you, Your Excellency, for being the first one to open the diplomatic dialogue here at the Institute of International Relations and the Diplomatic Academy of the Caribbean. Just to remind you, as I was mentioning to you, at the open of the Diplomatic Academy of the Caribbean a few years ago, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was good enough to send someone all the way from Seoul to attend that open ceremony. Left a lasting impression on the relationship between the university, the institute, and of course the countries. So today we are very fortunate to have this open discussion and lecture on the issue of the Republic of Korea, and with specific reference to the current peace process that is continuing. By way of a few words, I would like to just indicate that the Republic of Korea, as we have come to know it as South Korea, has leaped into a new orbit. More so recently, with respect to, firstly, it has moved from being a developing country to a developed country in a fairly short period of time, and the institutions that you have established to help chart that direction is one that we have had some relationship with. That is the Institute for Economic Development, I believe, in Seoul, Korea. Secondly, it has built a tremendous capacity to use imagination in the field of information science, and perhaps is the world leading country in that respect, and we all know what it has happened in terms of the use of imagination, I call it, in information science. Thirdly, we have found that the Republic of Korea has been able to very quietly but very effectively connect its newfound wealth to the issues of power in the world, connecting power with wealth in a different way to what has been a custom in the history of diplomacy. And that has really led to what has been your most recent accomplishment, or at least accomplishment still in progress, which is the pursuit of a nuclear-free region in the peninsula of Korea, and in so doing, reducing enormously the tensions in the global search for peace with respect to this era of nuclear world. This orbit in which you have found yourself, not by accident, but by many different endeavors and action, has also been supported by some new challenges in the frontiers, both of your own country and indeed of the global economic environment in which we live. And one is the process of unification of the Koreas. And I remember visiting, when I made a visit some years ago, the Institute for Unification. At that time, there was a lot of tension between the two Koreas, as we call them. Still is, but in a different way then. And the Institute of Unification was apparently something that has been set up a long time. So although there were major differences in the historical pathway that the countries have embarked upon since the modern times after the Korean War, the Institute of Unification was set up, which tells us the lesson that that is an area which you need constant and regular inquiry, both at the level of scholarship and certainly in the articulation of that scholarship into policy directions. Perhaps we are now beginning to see a little bit of that light, and I don't know how far that will go in what short space of time. More recently, in your newfound position in global diplomacy, a few years ago you chaired the G20 meeting in Korea, and we are about to witness another G20 meeting in Argentina in another couple of weeks' time. And so it reminded me about what was the contribution of your chairing of that meeting in 2 years or 3 years ago, I believe it was, And I came across a little note that I had for my visit, in which I quoted from then The Economist, who said the G20 held in Korea, and the Koreans made it such that it is a talking shop worth having. And I thought that was a very important shift in trying to make reality a result of the discussion. So your work in that area has been well recognized at that time. But there's so many other areas. So what has really happened, I think, is that now you find that you have grown in terms of diplomatic power. Relatively small country, depending how you want to define that, but in today's world, it has clearly grown in diplomatic power. And your new president that was just elected just over a year ago, President Moon-up, has been emerging as one of the key proponents and leaders in a concrete set of proposals for peace in the world, and more specifically for the peace in which you shall speak about. So today we are fortunate to have Ambassador with us, who, coming from the new orbit in which Korea, the Republic of Korea, has found itself, will talk on the topic of the journey to lasting peace. Most intriguing at this time, and getting, as our Professor Byron said, and it's, well, I don't know how much of it will be insider's view, but as a view from within the Korean professional grouping and the ambassadors, on the journey to lasting peace. And the word journey is there, and the word lasting is there, both of which we'll be very keen on seeing how it will emerge, what are the next steps, and how it will be sustained over time. Ambassador Moon-up's song is an academic in some ways, for he became a graduate of Seoul University and the University of Michigan earlier on in the field of arts and in the field of public policy. So he came well prepared for what turned out to be a most distinguished career in the field of diplomacy. He held many postings in his earlier years, and we are very fortunate to have someone of that stature coming to us here in Trinidad and Tobago. He had postings firstly in Paris with the OCED, and then subsequently he had postings in the Republic of Afghanistan, and has also held, of course, high positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Korea. More recently, he has been posted to Seattle, USA. He has been posted to the Kingdom of Sweden, and he has been posted to Australia. So he's come from a wide global experience to Trinidad and Tobago, another part of the world, the Caribbean region, which has always found a close link between Korea and Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll give you a small little note that I could never understand. Once I attended, or I always do attend sometimes, church services, and this was a church service in a Presbyterian church, and the book of hymns was written in English on one hand, in Korean on the other side. And I still could not understand how that happened and was produced locally. So there was something I have to unearth about 100 years ago. What was the relationship that led to that kind of cultural expression of an affinity between our country and Korea? So with this in mind, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you and to hear from Ambassador Moon-up, on his contribution to the development of this most exciting period in global politics and diplomacy. Professor?
Thank you, Your Excellency Minister Dukaran, for your kind introduction, and thank you, Director Jessica Bryan, for inviting me, and I'm very honored to take podium today and to present, especially as the first speaker of this series of the diplomatic dialogues organized by the Institute of International Relations. So, yeah, so always the air in the university makes me comfortable and free. So I'd like to be relaxed and to make sure that present about the Korea issue of Korea this afternoon. So my topic today is Korea, the journey to lasting peace. So as the Minister Dukaran has explained, so there are two points, the journey and the lasting peace. So I can explain what that means to Korea issues, especially the nuclear issues in Korean Peninsula. So I have three topics today. The first one is introduce the short introduce of Korea. Korea is South Korea itself to you, and as an ambassador of Republic of Korea to Trinidad and Tobago, I would like also to highlight some of the bilateral relations with Korea and Trinidad and Tobago, and it could be followed by our main topic this afternoon about inter-Korean relations or the Korean Peninsula issues. So in the sense, I'm a little bit ambitious to deal with all of these three topics. The time allocated to me this afternoon is about 40 minutes. So, and after that, we have a question and answers time that you might have, and also I would like to share our observation on the Korean the issues. So let's move and let's get into the journey, little journey to Korea this afternoon. The first about Korea. So Korea is nowadays known as a middle power country in the world, and it is the country of the K-pop or K-culture, and also the nation which achieved the both industrialization and the democratization in just a short period of several decades of time. So first, let me add just a snapshot of the what South Korea stands nowadays. The population of Korea is about 50 million people, and the life expectancy in Korea is about more than 80 years. So I think that it is noticeable. It is one of the highest the age of this world. So I think that one of the reasons, elements why Korea has attained so high the life expectancy is that in Korea, so there is the universal health system was introduced in 1979. So after that, all the Korean people has the accessibility to their healthcare and the hospital system. So we are proud of that system. It is one of the the insurance and the social insurance system in Korea. Also, I forget that, so I'd like to recognize Ambassador Okada and Mrs. Okada for your attendance, and also so the students, and very welcome to this afternoon session. And Korea, so we have a history about 5,000 years. So in Korean Peninsula, Since about 5,000 years ago, the Korean people lived on. So we have one race, and we speak same language, and we live in the same place for those 5,000 long years. So this picture is about one of our national heritage. It is called the Palman Daejangyeong. It was made in 14th century, and it is now housed in southern part of our Korean temples. It is a Tripitaka, and the anthology of the Buddhist Bible is inscribed in the wooden plate. So there are 80,000 that piece. So that Tripitaka is stored in one of the Korean temples. So it is one of the national treasures. So other than that, we have some rich and abundant cultural heritages. Okay, and the Korean democracy. So the system of the Korean voting. So we vote our president, the head of the state, by popular vote since 1987. It is just over 30 years. And so in that regard, our history with democracy is rather the short period. So but I think that democracy in Korea, like other countries, is evolving and is in progress. So we would like, through our democracy, to make our country be more accountable and be more transparent. Our economy is now the 11th largest economy, and our export is the 7th largest or 6th largest nation in the world, and our GDP is about 30,000 US dollars. So yeah, it is remarkable. Over past 5 decades, we achieved such the remarkable economic progress. So some people called it and touted it as the miracle of Han River. So what I'm thinking is why it is miracle, because at the time and after the Korean War in 1950s, Korea doesn't have any resources and commodities, capitals, or even any technology. So out of that, Korea has achieved. I think that there are many elements to how to we progress our economy, develop our economy, but there is right policy, economic policy, industrial policy, to allocate our scarce resources in a very efficient way, and also we have a very good manpowers and through our education system. So and also our investment and investment in the right field, and also we will pursue the export-oriented our economic policy, and also our R&D, still R&D, research and development investment stands for about 4% of our GDP, which is the second largest portion, the ratio in the world. So we continue to innovate and develop our economy. So I think that the various mix of the policies, I believe, can achieve such the achievement. Our exports, our economy is somewhat heavily rely on our trade, and especially our exports. And this graph describes our top 10 export items. Nowadays, the semiconductors, which is used mobile phone and AI, artificial intelligence, something like that. It is the semiconductor is Korea is number one, the market share in the world. So it is followed by the shipbuilding, automobiles, and so that present that Korea is one of the manufacturing the powerhouse in the world. However, I think that there is also the challenges for Korean economy. So because as our economy, the size grows year by year, the case by the case, our economic vitality it seems to be slowed down. So in 78 or 80s, our economic growth is about around 10% per year. And after that, it is 7% and 5%. And nowadays, 2 or 3% economic growth per annum. So there is some slowing at the economic dynamics or vitality. And there is the demographic issues that as our the birth rate and is just one of the lowest in the world. It is just 1.21 people. So, and also our society getting older, and the aging society. And the thing is that the speed. So in just over 10 or 20 years, Korea is one of the rapidest aging society in OECD countries. So that makes also our economy somewhat the sluggish, and also there is issue of the employment like any other country in the world. So sluggish and the soaring unemployment rates eating the demand, domestic demand, and also as well as the investment in the domestic market. So there is some challenges, so we have to also deal with, and the Korea industry and the Korean government are pursuing some innovative policies. So we are now moving. Some people say that whether it is the fourth industrial relations or industry 4.0 or the transformation, whatever it calls. So we are now moving into some another age of the industrial or the economic trends in the world. So Korea would like to adapt that trend, and in some part to leading the way by innovating and also making some the more sort of freer the trade environment. So there is some movement in these days how to protect protectionism in the global trade. So Korea usually always support the free trade system. So that is about the Korean economy, and yes, many of you might be familiar with the Korean elements of the Korean culture, whether it is K-wave, K-pop, Korean singers, and food, and hanbok, Korean costumes, and Korean martial arts. So we would like to, with our neighbors and with our global communities, to share the cultures. And let me move on now to next topics of item of the bilateral relations with Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm accredited. Yeah, first, let me say about public sector cooperation. So I have noticed several the exchange of the high-level officials since our diplomatic relations in 1985. So the Speaker of the House and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Trade, Investment, and Education has visited Korea over the past years. And Korea also value the platform of the Korea Caribbean High Level Forum and Korea Latin America Future Cooperation Forum to discuss the issues mutually interested with Trinidad and Tobago. In terms of the economic interactions, what is the distinguished word is that our trade. Since 2009, so I just highlight how the trade relation has evolved over the past decade. So the highest volume was in 2010, 2011, 2012. So usually the pattern is that Korea imports more from Trinidad and Tobago. We import gas, natural gas, ammonium, and we export automobiles and the electronics to Trinidad and Tobago. But usually it is Korea that who import more from Trinidad and Tobago. And what is noticeable in terms of the data of the trade is this year compared with the last year. As of September this year, our import from Trinidad and Tobago is $237 million US, which is 100% larger than last year. So I think that that resonates also the economic situation of Trinidad and Tobago. As the economy in Trinidad and Tobago picking up, so does the trade between Korea has also fluctuated with that standard. So I hope that our bilateral relations, economic relation, will further enhance in coming years as the economy in Trinidad and Tobago continues to grow. And also that economic cooperation is safeguarded by the agreements between our two countries, the Economic Technical Cooperation Agreement, as well as the Investment Protection Agreement, which has been in effect since the mid-2000. In terms of the people-to-people exchange or the cultural exchange, so we are happy that the embassy has opened the Korea corner at the university last year. So we provide some materials to better to understand Korean and Korean people. And there is a Korean scholarship program. We invite the students from Trinidad and Tobago for Korean undergraduate and graduate the programs. So more than, I think that 13 students as of this year has come to Korea and is studying the Korean language and Korean their majors, so in Korea. Korean embassy also organizing some of the cultural events in Trinidad. So we invite the Korean cultural performers almost every year to the Trinidad and Tobago to taste the Korean cultures in Trinidad and Tobago. In the global arena, so I think that Korea and Trinidad and Tobago share the same value of the democracy and the market economy, and as a like-minded partner in coping of the various global agenda. So we work together in the global stage, including the United Nations. So, for example, it is about the climate change issues and the human rights issues as well. So one of the human rights issues is I remember that this year, so the Professor Rhoda Leddock from the university has been selected as nominated as the member of the CEDAW, the Committee on eliminating the discrimination against all women's committee in the United Nations. So Korea was happy to support and in cooperation with that nomination in June this year. So that concludes the presentation about the Korea and the bilateral relations with Trinidad and Tobago. And let me move now the third and my last topic of today. So Korean Peninsula last issues. So our President Moon, who has visited Pyongyang last month, one of his speeches was that we live together as one nation for 5,000 years and divided only for 70 years. So division in Korean Peninsula, in recalling our whole history, it is just a short period of time. He stressed that point at his speech in North Korea. Okay. So it is some history and also the map of Korea. So when I say I'm the Korean, so but when I studying or the look into the issue of Korea, so why such a small country like Korea sometimes draw the attention, global attention. So my interpretation is, I think that because it is about the geopolitics, because Korea is located at the crossroad where the major powers or major nations of a global community interest meet. In other words, Korea is the linchpin of the stability and the security in the Northeast Asia, or in broader terms in the world stage. So that the map is Korea and South Korea, or Republic Korea, North Korea, or DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and it is the history since the early 20th century until now, and one of the defining moments of our modern history of 100 years is about so the Korea is colonized by Japan, and soon after there was a Korean War broken out. So I think that those are two elements of the defining moments of Korean modern history. So in 1945, Korea was liberalized, and soon after that, there are two different the governments has set in Korea, in the South Korea and the North Korea. So some in 1948, but there was some instability and the conflicts inside Korea that led to the Korean War in 1950. So the Korean War broke out in 1950, and the war lasted 3 years, about 3 years, and it has more than 2 million casualties. Most of them are civilians, and I think during the 3 period of years of the war has been terminated with the Armistice Treaty, not the peace treaty. That is the legacy that remains until today. So it is just stop the war, not to stop the war, but still at war technically with the Armistice Treaty. So. During 3 years of Korean War, so at first, so North Korea invaded South Korea at the time, and North Korean military was so powerful, and they overpowered the South Korean military, and they occupied most of the South Korean territory, except some small section of the southern part of South Korea. But United Nations, the military, under the led by the many U.S. troops, has pushed back, and And just in 38 parallel demarcation lines, so there was some tit and tat the period between South and North Korea over 3 years. So that the agreement in armistice agreement was concluded in 1953. So one of the noticeable things during Korean War is that it is revealed later that during Korean War, as the North Korean military was so powerful that the U.S. government seems to consider to use the nuclear bombs to North Korea to defeat the North Korean army. But eventually they abandoned that idea because it is hard to find out the right target in North Korea because the military, the arsenal or military facility has been scattered around North Korea, so they cannot find the right targets with atomic nuclear bombs. And also if U.S. could use the nuclear bombs, then the Soviet Union could fight back with the same or similar kind of the arsenal, which could spark the nuclear war, which is maybe Third World War, just after 5 years of the Second World War. So yeah, it is just 5 years after the using the atomic bombs in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it could be a case if it is. So anyway, so that attempts still, so they could frighten the North Korea and the North Korean leaders at that time. So I think that the minds and that thought has still remained in the minds of the Korean military and leaders. So after Korean War in 1950s, since the 1950s, there was the confrontation between South and North Korea, whether it is military or it is political. So that trends continue in 1960s and 70s. So 1960s and 70s, it is the Cold War era, and the channels of the dialogue remained frozen due to the influence of the Cold War. So it was until early 1990s when, yes, in 1989, the rest of Berlin Wall has fell down, so did the Cold War. So there is a reconciliation, the move in Korean Peninsula. So in 1992, both Korean government has agreed agreement on the reconciliation, non-aggression, cooperation, and exchange agreement, which is called Basic Agreement. In the same year, the both government, led by Prime Minister, signed the agreement or a declaration of denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. So there was a basic agreement that how two Koreas after Cold War period to coexist and reconcile without any the weapons of mass destruction the threat. And so, but that the story does not go as we wishes. So it is North Korea nuclear test, the chronology, history. There is a longevity of this issue, of Korean issue. It is about 30 years of history of negotiation and confrontation, provocation. In terms of the nuclear test, so North Korea conducted 6 nuclear tests so far until last year, September last year, which is the 6th. So as they test by test, what is so important is that they seems to increase their power, the nuclear wheels. So the last one, the sixth nuclear test, it is estimated that they carry about 100, more than 100 KT, kiloton TT, the magnitude, which is 50 times higher than the first one in 2006, which is just only 2 kiloton TT. So the power seems to be increased significantly, and North Korea claims that the last nuclear bomb test was the hydrogen bomb, which is in a totally different category of the nuclear arms. So they seems to increase their nuclear wheels test by days, and they also seems to try to miniaturize their arsenal through their testing. So, which is poses threat to neighboring countries. Let me just look through the history how this nuclear issue has evolved over the 30 years. So the first is in 1992. So as I mentioned, there is some reconciliation mood in Korean Peninsula, but it broke just 1 year after, when in 1993 North Korea declared that they withdraw from the NPT, or Non-Proliferation Treaty, in 1993. So that surprised the world, and the IAEA, the international safeguard body, inspectors arrived in North Korea, and what they found is that the report from North Korean government about nuclear materials, and what they found in the facility, in the site, there is a difference and the discrepancy. So the international community so recognized that North Korea is beginning to develop the nuclear programs in a serious way. So that is the first North Korean nuclear crisis recorded in 1994. Again, so the U.S. government, surprised by that movement, also it is also revealed later that seems to attack bomb North Korean facility, presumed producing the nuclear weapons facility, but afraid of the heavy casualty which might cause from that the movement, refrain U.S. government under the President Clinton, and instead the former president, the U.S. President Jimmy Carter, has visited Pyongyang in 1994 and met North Korean leader, then leader Kim Il-sung, and they reached the agreement, which is called the Geneva Framework Agreement. In that agreement, the U.S. provided the security to North Korea, and they provide energy by building the light water reactor. And North Korea, in response, they returned to the non-proliferation regime, and to abide by the international rules. So that agreement seems to work well until the end of 2000, and then U.S. State Secretary Madame Albright has visited North Korea in 2000, and one of the top North Korean military officials visited Washington D.C. and they discussed about the visit of the U.S. President Clinton's visit to Pyongyang, North Korea in 2000. But in 2000, there was an election in the United States, and there is a new government, the Republican, President Bush. Mr. Bush was elected as a new U.S. president. And 2001, 2001, in his State Union address, President Bush named North Korea as one of the nations and one of the axis of evil nation in the world, together with Iran and Iraq. So that was in 2001. And in 2003, so I think that there was one opportunity in 2000 under the U.S. President Clinton that there might some deal struck between U.S. and North Korea about the nuclear issues. So in 2001 and 2003, there is another issue that we call it the second North Korea nuclear crisis. So when the North Korea declared and revealed that they have the uranium enrichment program. So in order to develop nuclear weapons, there are two approaches. The first one is the plutonium processing approach. Spend fuel the laws with that, so they can make the bombs and the weapons. And the other one is uranium, by enriching the uranium, so they can make more powerful the nuclear weapons. So it was the first time that North Korea revealed that they have the uranium enrichment, the programs. That surprised again to world. So by reacting to that response, the international community in this time, they engaged, not one country, 2 countries, 6 countries. So there was the 6-party talks chaired by China, Republic of China. So China, Japan, U.S., Russia, South Korea, and North Korea. So all the stakeholders in this issue has gathered, and they met and negotiate round by round until 2007. So it was on 2007 September, and they reached an agreement, which is called the 919 the agreement, where they agreed that verify denuclearization of Korean Peninsula, and they pursue and take steps to normalize the diplomatic relation between North Korea, U.S., and North Korea, Japan. And they also pursue the lasting, the permanent peace in Korean Peninsula, which is somewhat familiar to this. So we have also had that agreement in 2007. It is signed by the 6-party nations, usually the ministerial level, the officials, and endorsed by each government. And in 2007, but after that, in 2007, there was an election in Korea, and also new government was then in Korea at that time. It is a more conservative government. And in 2008, as you know, there is the global financial crisis. So since then, the U.S. posture toward this issue seems to be called the strategic impatience. So they just strategic patience. They just wait until North Korea denuclearizes itself. In simpler terms. So yeah, so that is the situation until 2011. 2011, there is demise of the North Korean leader, Mr. Kim Jong-il, and his son, Kim Jong-un, took power in 2011. So under his leadership, you know, he carried out 4 out of the 6 North Korean nuclear tests. He conducted 4 nuclear tests, and not only for the nuclear tests, they carried out also the missile tests. They tried many times the short or medium range missile test previous times, But what is the remarkable last year? It was the long range, even the intercontinental range missiles. So in November last year, so they launched called the Hwasong 15. So they launched in November last year. So they claimed that its range is about 13,000 kilometers. 13,000 from it covers from North Korea until to the Washington D.C. United States. So they claimed in November. So they complete their nuclear programs. So which means that North Korea is ready to negotiate with the United States. So yeah, they claim the intercontinental ballistic missiles, but in order to be effective with the ICBM, so the scientists said that when the missiles go into the space and they should re-entry into the atmosphere, at the time of the re-entry, so the rocket should endure the very hot temperatures, like the 6,000 Celsius temperatures. It is not known whether it is not clear whether the North Korean that has secured such techniques, but they claim they have the ranges. So almost every month last year, there was the provocation by launching the missiles by North Korea. In such provocations, the international community respond by denouncing and condemning such provocation and activities, and also by adopting the United Nations the Security Council resolution. Yeah, so the last one is in last December, which is one of the strongest in the history of the United Nations against nation who has committed some provocation. That resolution contains a very long list of the sanctions measures. So the resolution bans the export of iron ore, coals, fisheries, which is the main items of North Korea. And also they restrict the supply of crude oil and refinery petroleum products to North Korea, which is a lifeline to North Korea. So together with the United Nations resolution, there is also the unilateral resolutions in effect. The U.S., European Union, Japan, Australia, Korea, all so many of the nations has taken measures to punish such the provocative actions from North Korea. Yeah. So why we are talking about denuclearization in Korean Peninsula? I think that there are three different layers of the rationale why we continue to pursue the nuclearization of Korean Peninsula. So for Korea, it is so very obvious that we would like to live in a freer and a safer the place, and we'd like to reduce the military tensions and working toward the economic cooperation and prosperity. In the regional level, so in Northeast Asia, so with the nuclear weapons in the hands of the North Korea could spark the race of the nuclear arms in Northeast Asia, China, Japan, and with as potential nations. So yeah, it is that sparks not only to North Korea, so in the Asia, Southeast Asia, and that should destabilize the security and the safety in the world. And if it in global level, so there is the fear that if nuclear the weapons arms could be fall into the hands of the group of terrorists, that it is a real threat to the life of everyone else. So there are enough reasons why we have to work, even though it is not an easy one to work toward the denuclearization of North Korea. So the thing is how to resolve. So as I so brief, over the past 3 years, past 3 decades, we have taken efforts and worked together, but we could not succeed in complete resolution of the North Korean nuclear issues. Excuse me. So how to resolve? So there are two ways, whether we have to confront and or to make dialogue and the negotiation. So dialogue and negotiation is the way that we are now adapting and pursuing these issues. So for this year, there are 3 inter-Korean the leaders meeting. Over past 6 months, there are 3 meetings between South Korean President and North Korean Chairman Kim. And there was a meeting between U.S. and North Korea in June. So in the U.S. and the North Korea summit, there are several points, the highlight points that the 2 leaders agreed to seek new relations between U.S. and North Korea. They would like to seek new relations, and they will work together the denuclearization of Korean Peninsula, and they will also make efforts for the last and stable peace in Korean Peninsula. So if you look back on 1 year ago, when there is a looming crisis or even the military crisis in Korean Peninsula, so there is the difference of the different situations. So we think that the international community's coherent approach toward North Korea, and North Korea changed their calculations, so and it is brought back to the negotiation table to this time. Oh, So it is the process of denuclearization and permanent peace regime. So yeah, I think denuclearization and permanent peace regime is interlinked today. So before that, so let me highlight the position of South Korea. So toward this issue. So South Korean government do not seek any regime change in North Korea or any hostile posture toward North Korea, or do not seek the arbitrary or hurried reunification of Korean Peninsula. We do just seek peace. It is the lasting peace beyond the armistice agreement, peace agreement. We do seek the complete resolution of North Korean issues. And so Korea, South Korea is working closely with the United States to deal with this issue. South Korea and the U.S. has the same view that we cannot accept North Korea as the nuclear powers. We work very closely, and we work together to resolve in this issue peaceful manner. And also the China has maintained their principles, three basic principles for China in dealing with this issue is that they want denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. They want to resolve this issue in a peaceful and through negotiation, and they want to maintain the peace and the security in Korean Peninsula. So there is a common element among those the countries. So with that background, so we are in a now process of denuclearization. So when you talk about denuclearization, what is denuclearization? So it could be categorized to what should be denuclearized. There are nuclear materials, through that requirement there will be a facility for making nuclear weapons, and there is knowledge, nuclear knowledge. So what we are pursuing is that when there is a complete the resolution is that there should be known the nuclear material, facility, and the weapons. And the nuclear knowledge, maybe it is in the hands of the scientist. So it could be categorized as the nuclear in the future. So when you talk about denuclearization, we should the North Korea should abandon all the nuclear materials, facility, and the weapons. And how to proceed? So usually in the denuclearization process might be the country should report and a list of what they have, whether it is the material, the uranium, or the plutonium materials, and then it is followed by the inspection, usually by the IAEA, and the final stage could be demolish all the nuclear materials. So usually in the history of dealing with this issue, the inspection is the matter hurdle to prove the moment of the realization. So if that facility, that the process could be matched with the permanent peace regime. So the end of the war, Korean War, end of the Armistice Treaty is replaced by the peace treaty. So, and then it could be followed the diplomatic normalization between U.S., North Korea, and U.S., Japan, and the Western world. So it seems that in North Korea there is the negotiation, and the second North Korea-U.S. summit is expected to be held in coming months. In order to prepare for that summit, U.S. State Secretary Mr. Pompeo has visited North Korea in 2 weeks ago because the nuclear issue with the long-range missile is the issue mainly between North Korea and the U.S. and there is ongoing and the ministerial level and soon maybe working level the negotiation is going to be held in Austria in coming weeks. So North Korea seems that their position is that so they announce they dismantle and they shut down their nuclear facility, which is located in Yeongbyon area, in northeast part of the North Korea, and the permanent the shutdown of the facility. And they also they announced the dismantle of the long-range missile engine test site, which is western part of North Korea in Dongchang-ni. And So they ask for of their those the measures. The U.S. respond in the October the measures. It should be beyond the end of Korean War, and they yeah so and so they ask more than that. However, the U.S. seems to be, in my sense, that there should be substantive the denuclearization measures by North Korea should be taken before moving to the end declaration of the end of Korean War. So there is some the gaps might be, but which could be fulfilled in the end. So that seems the situation now. And the history of the past years seems to be the prospect, the negotiation process, not to be bright. But I think optimistic because this approach since early this year is somewhat there is different aspects of what we have had in previous years. I think the first that it is the leaders of U.S., South and North Korea is now heavily engaged by themselves, by themselves. So also they are newly elected leaders. The President Trump and our President Moon Jae-in and the North Korean leader is just so. It is there are new leaders in the old game of this issue. So in previous times there is agreement in the ministerial level or the prime minister's level, but in this time it is the leaders of the nations who are engaged in this. So it might be some top-down approach. So North Korea claims that in response to the U.S. The argument that there is lack of the trust between U.S. and North Korea. So if North Korea reports what they have as a nuclear materials, it could be different what the U.S. The intelligence might have. So then it could be some mistrust toward North Korea, and that could break down the negotiation itself. So by building up the trust, U.S. could also take measures so toward the peace regime. Then North Korea will follow by their own denuclearization process. The other element is that North Korean situation. North Korean Kim Jong-un has taken power since 2011 with his father, and he at first as he inaugurated, he pursued both the military build-up and the economic development. But they realized that with only for the military build-up or the nuclear powers, they cannot feed their people. It is not well connected to the welfare or the well-being of the North Korean people. So North Korea now desperately needs the economic development. There is observation for last years that there is creation of the private markets, hundreds of private markets in North Korea, and also there is conversion of the collective farms to family farms. So there is some experiment or the elements of the market economy in North Korea. So without economic development, the legitimacy of North Korea leader and the government could be destabilized. So they know that. So they have to develop their economy for betterment of their people. So in order to do that, they need, they have to be in the negotiation table in trading for nuclear programs for the economic development, for example. So that is the my presentation. I hope that my presentation put some of the ideas of what has been done in the issue and what could be done in the issue. So it is up to you. So what I'm hoping the issue of the nuclear for Korea. Korea is it is an urgent issue. So there is the threat of the war in Korean Peninsula last year. The North and South Korea is just 100 kilometers away. Even without the nuclear wars, if there is a war, it is just within the hands of just minutes from North Korea. So it is a matter of life or death. Simple terms that for Korean people. So yeah, but so but also in the magnitude of this the importance, it is also the pose importance to the global community. So I hope my presentation to better understand of this situation and Korean issues. So that concludes my presentation. I will have the questions or answers that might have addressed. Yeah, thank you.
Much, Your Excellency, for tracing these moments of history. Not too long ago, we were on the edge of a precipice. Now we are hoping to have a new durable peace initiative effected. And you have given us discovery of the complexity of the situation, not only in the context of the two Koreans, but also in the context of the Korean Peninsula and the countries that are directly affected by it. So I want to thank you very much for the great insights and the openness with which you have discussed these issues here today. So I will open the floor for any comments or questions to His Excellency. Okay. So we'll take a round of questions and then we will take a second round if necessary. Yes. I see the hands up at the back there. Just identify.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Michelle Scobie from the Institute. I'm lecturer of international law here. Very interesting. Thank you, Excellency, for your presentation. And it's always nice to hear. I've been to South Korea as well, Incheon, and it's a lovely place. And it's very promising to see this change. Question in your presentation, you highlighted that a lot of the change towards denuclearization is due to personalities. New president in the North, leading a change vision for the North, and maybe stronger personalities in the West as well. But at the same time, we see that in the nuclear test, four of them have been carried out under the new president. So my question is this: is this a temporary change in his perspective as to the need to denuclearize, himself being the one that has led to more tests being carried out in the peninsula in the shorter period of time? So my question is, if we're placing trust in the changing personalities leading to a longer lasting peace, and this same personality was the one that had most nuclear tests, is it that, do you see a permanent change in his perspective towards denuclearization, Or do you see this as a trend that may again change, just as he changed to have more nuclear tests? I ask that because I think in diplomacy, the role of personalities is really important, you know, and certainly in the period in which we're in at the global level with Brexit, with what's happening in the United States, etc., the role of personalities in the diplomacy and in the foreign relations directions, that's quite important. But you probably have more insight on what's happening at the second level of the two Koreas. Is it the personality only that is changing, or do you think that there's a wider shift within the peninsula as to the need for greater unification, or is that only from the top? I hope my question is clear. 2 points, yeah? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Scobie. Beyond personalities, is it going to be sustainable? Yes, we'll take 3 questions and then the ambassador will attempt to respond.
Hello, my name is Michael Pawinski. I'm the lecturer of this institute. I'm referring to the slide you have presented to us, and the question is why North Korea should denuclearize itself? I mean, the question is very simple and obvious. However, the reasoning behind it is much more complex. The history shows that nuclear weapons are a stabilizing factor between the countries, and actually they are acting as effective deterrents between two power relations, like the case of India and Pakistan. Furthermore, also history shows that renunciation of the nuclear weapons is a potential threat, as in the case of Libya, Iraq, or recently the agreement in regard to Iran. So it is potential threat also for North Korea for the future. And not to mention that it's also a possible threat from the South Korea, which had its own nuclear program in 2004, which hesitantly admitted to the Atomic Agency about its existence. So, in other words, why North Korea should denuclearize?
Thank you, Doc. So how does all this fit into the wider geopolitics of nuclear powers in the world? Yes, third question.
Hi, good day. My name is Darian Paul. I recently finished my bachelor's degree at UCL, University College London. And being in London, I've come into contact with a lot of international students, especially Korea and Singapore. And my question is, as a diaspora, I would say that Trinidadians don't have a lot of faith in their country in terms of like wanting to come back home and establish companies, whereas I see almost all the Korean students that I've seen and the Singaporean students go immediately back home. Like, they want to go back home, they don't want to stay. And I want to know if you think that is because of the military program that they have, the essential military program. So my question is more, how can we establish that sense of national pride within our people so that we will have the ability to create the type of economy that North Korea and Singapore have, since we have almost the same population size as Singapore, and we have more natural resources than they do. How can we duplicate or replicate a similar system to that? Thank you.
Are there lessons to be learned from the Korean experience to our own situation here with respect to the movement of, or to the expression of nationalist pride? Excellency, you want to?
Okay, so thank you for the questions. And yes, some of them are huge questions, and I found it very interesting. The first question from Mrs. Corbia, so I love that questions, and also in my school years, the personality is one of the elements which shape the relations between nations, and even people to people. So yes, in my presentation there should surely be some the patterns which is caused by the personality, but basically I think that the framework on approaching this issue is kind of a puzzle among different countries which have different interests in this issue. So I think that might be coincide with the personality of the leaders of this issue. Some North Korean leaders, the grandfather of the current leader Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un. So Kim Il-sung, the grandfather, at the time there was no nuclear test, so he tries to develop, but as time goes on, the nuclear test has been frequented. So that could be translated into that Mr. Kim Jong-un, leader Kim Jong-un, is more volatile or they're aggressive. That might be, but my interpretation is that it is about the system. It is related to the second question. So why North Korea developed their nuclear weapons by sacrificing their economy and their relations with other nations, is that they want to seek their security of their region, North Korean region, which is unique in the world. So if they change it and they move to the democratic system with the voting system and elect their leaders, so I think they feel at very least their temptation to go to the nuclear weapons. But they want to keep their regime, the regime of the family regime. So they, in that sense, they are consistent in pursuing the developing the nuclear the programs. So there is some continuity and persistence in North Korean issues, and the U.S. and South Korea also we have the democratic society. There is the change of government with the different usually in foreign policy there is the unilateral uniformity, but in this case there is some fluctuation in Korea, in the U.S., and whether it is more engaged or just so take away and just some wait and see approach, for example. So that combination has coincided. So if that cycle is in good combination and with good personality, that might create the favorable condition for solving this issue. But there is the character issue, but there is also another issue of the interest, national interest, and the strategic interest among the nations, mainly the 6 nations. So that makes this issue complex. That makes the issue complex. So I agree with your point. There is element of the characters in these complex issues. So, and the second issue of the why they nuclear. So I'm also curious why they people, 25 million North Korean people suffering for long decades. So, but I think that in my presentation, my guess is that in Korean War, during the Korean War, there was some fear that North Korea might be influenced by nuclear weapons, nuclear bombs, and also it was in 1990s after Cold War. Their allies like Russia, Soviet Union has been collapsed at the time, and China has diplomatic relations with South Korea. So China has different the economic systems. So they feel, I think that they feel some isolated at the time. So they need to something that secure their regime. But so they don't have any the economic power or the resources to mobilize to match the South Korean economy or South Korean military power. So in order to match from their perspective, nuclear weapons, if it is developed, it is one way of developing such powerful weapons in a cheaper way. So they have to seems to rely on their approach for. So mainly, I think that they want to keep their regime. They want to keep their regime, and so in order to do that, there is very rare the channels to secure the regime. So only they no other choice but to develop the nuclear weapons. But they are now facing the time to choose whether they to abandon their nuclear weapons, since they claim that they complete their nuclear programs. So I don't think that if they try again nuclear test or long missile test, it is the it could be contracted what they said. So when last year they complete their nuclear programs. So I hope that no major nuclear test in the coming years, in the months. But maybe who knows that there is possibility if the negotiation does not working well. So they might spark another provocation. And Mr. Darenpour, so thank you for your the comment on the Korean people of our national pride. So yeah, so yes, some Korean young people take pride on that. But like other the young people in Indonesia, so they have their own the way of life, and so they are doing themselves. So I think in terms of the national pride or the patriotism, so yes, they might have, but I think that before that they are doing their best. They just, in my view, they just enjoy themselves. So the system that how the Korean young people have their pride is that the Korean young people seems to be has the attitude toward meeting the challenges. So Korea is one of the largest, one of the nations that dispatch the peace the course in the world. In terms of the per capita, more than 10,000 Korean young people are abroad for the volunteers. So in that sense, I think that the Korean young people, so they are challenging and they are doing what they want and what they like. And I think that it should be backed by the government or the system, but I'm not sure. As a public service, whether the Korean government has provided enough the infra or system what the Korean young people needs, but Korean government is trying to. So I think in terms of the system, I'm not sure what could be distinguished about the education system. So, and also still the Korean society is some mobile. So when they work hard and there is opportunity to make money or to have something what they want. So that hope or the opportunity could motivate young people to what they want in the future. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure this is only the beginning of answers to some very deep questions. 5,000 years of history and 50 years of history create new sense of national prides. Oh, Mr. Bika.
Thank you. My name is Enyoma Obika, and completing a master's in global studies here. I'm also the recent former High Commissioner of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to Nigeria. And I can remember while there between 2011 and 2015, under the leadership of His Excellency Winston Dukran, who was our Minister of Foreign Affairs, that in my interchanges with the North Korean ambassador, in Abuja, I found them to be extremely self-confident, articulate, and he even promised to come and set up an embassy in Trinidad, okay? But that's just an aside. To me, I'm very interested in this topic. I must also mention to that earlier this year, Dr. Shami, in her course on diplomacy, did feature this question of the Koreas. And to me, it's a fantastic test case. And there are some similarities between the German situation and Korea, because both cases emerged coming out of the Second World War, where you had East Germany and West Germany. And then there wasn't any North or South Korea, there was Korea, which was colonized by Japan in the 1920s. And it was the outcome of the Second World War that this question of North and South eventually emerged after the Korean War, because it was essentially one people, one nation, one history, one culture, one philosophy. So that my question to you, Excellency, is that having gone through the last 70 years post-World War II, and quite find it very interesting that the reference to the Koreas are not North and South. So after these 70 years, to what extent would you say that the philosophical and cultural foundation of the Korean people, either North or South, to what extent and has that been weakened? So, or is it still fundamentally based on the philosophy of life and the culture of the Koreas? Okay, to what extent has that, been weakened? Or are we still fundamentally dealing with one people? Okay, so because to me the question of denuclearization is not the fundamental issue. It has been made out as the fundamental issue. It did not arise as an issue with the Germans. Okay? But it is being made an issue with the Koreas. And I find that very interesting as to why Germany was not being demanded to be denuclearized, but the Koreans are. Okay? So, but that is just an aside. My question really is to what extent the people of the two Koreas, all right, have been so, deculturized, or in terms of their philosophy of life and whatnot. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Obika, who's just completed a book on the American presence and its psychological effects in Trinidad and Tobago during the Chagarama days, where we had a launch here not too long ago. Yes, at the back.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caroline Niles. I'm also a lecturer within this institute. I have two questions. One of them is in two parts. The first question is, I'd really appreciate if the Korean ambassador could shed some light on the family reunification process. So I know there's usually a lot of emphasis on the political reunification or even integration. But I would be really interested to hear more about if there have been any plans made thus far to bring families separated by the war closer together, or is that just going to be entirely contingent on denuclearization and the peace treaty when it's signed, or if it is signed? The second question is really about one of my areas of research is the cultural industries, and Korea, of course, is now featuring really heavily in academic literature and in the news as well, because you have now one of the few non-English speaking bands that are, well, probably the largest boy band in the world at this point in time. So my first question, obviously, is about BTS in that regard. What kind of, and obviously not about the band itself, but does the Korean government, as far as you know, really give public assistance to the sector? Do you fund cultural industries? And really, the reason I'm asking you this question is because I really am interested in how you use culture as a diplomatic tool, if you do at all. And if you do use culture as a diplomatic tool, have you sought to use culture as a diplomatic tool towards North Korea as well? And how did that go?
Okay. Professor Byron?
Sorry to take up question time because things are heating up. I just wanted to ask a question, Ambassador, but before that, I made a very bad omission in my opening remarks. I was fortunate enough to be a guest of the Korean Foundation in April and was royally treated in Seoul, in Korea, during a visit by a group of people who all came from the security sector or from diplomatic communities or academics in international relations. And we were there in Seoul about 2 weeks before the first inter-Korean summit of the two presidents. It was a very stimulating and exciting time to be there, and you know, the Seoul was full of both hope and debate concerning this initiative by your president. And I think it has been both a very courageous and so far fairly productive, although also very challenging diplomatic program. I wanted to ask one major question. In your address, you spoke about the importance of economic advances for North Korea, the importance of new investment, the importance that South Korea, I think, attaches to strengthening the prospects for prosperity in North Korea. I wanted to know how are you going to approach the question of sanctions, the huge wall of UN sanctions that have been imposed, as well as bilateral sanctions that have been imposed by the United States and also by the European Union in particular, because Korea, the Republic of Korea, will have to find a way also of launching a multilateral negotiation about the long and tedious process of reducing these sanctions. And I just wondered if you could throw any light on that particular aspect of the process.
Okay. Ambassador, you want to?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So, as Ambassador, Your Excellency Moon-up, so your question about the fundamental issues of the philosophical cultural foundation in Korea. So first, compare with Germany, which is united in 30 years ago. So, but there is difference. In Korea, we have a war. We had a war. So there is a scar among ourselves that and many casualties and dispersed peoples around Korea still after 70 years, about 70 years ending of the war. So, and also in Germany, so before the unification, there is the exchange of the people, and they are free to listen to the TVs and the dramas or the songs from the West Germany. So there is the degree of the exchange between people in Germany before unification, but in Korean case, North Korea is very closed, and they cut the channels from outside world. So their source to outer world has been very limited and restricted. So in that environment, as time goes on, the language, even we still share some our Korean language. So there is some the words, the phrase that could be different. So the use Korean language in North Korea is beginning to differentiate it to some extent. Also, the mindset seems to be something different. So in North Korea, still it is collective social system, which is contrary to the South Korea. So we worried that even we are one nation and one people, as this trend goes on, so how can we find our identity even after we united in coming decades or years? So that is the fundamental question. So we are one people, so that there is a common ground. So we have to be so that find some the commonalities between each other. But until this time, the North Korean issues, nuclear issues, and the provocation overshadow any relation or sentiment that we are one people. So Korean, the necessity of whether we need to be unified among young Korean people has been stagnated this time. So what young people, Korean people now say is they might say that we are one people, but if there is any other barrier or the threat from North Korea, what is most important is that we need to live peacefully or to live coexist. That is the issue that the Korean people now first. So that might be we are one people, one nation, and we share culture. Sounds somewhat ideologically to some extent today. So, but we surely continue to seek our identity, nationality, and common grounds. So that also could help alleviate the tensions between two Koreas. So, Professor Byron. So I'm saying that, but I'm representing Korea. But what I'm saying today, I think that this is some more the brainstorming session. So my presentation and the answers would not be necessarily be that of the government. So I look forward to your understanding as well. So. And also the second question of Mr. Ice, also, yeah, so the good observation of the dispersed people in Korea. So it is the humanitarian issue for Korean people. And what was agreed between two leaders of Korea is that first, between two Koreas should reduce the tensions, military tensions in Korean Peninsula, and also improve the inter-Korean relations. One of the elements of the improved inter-Korean relations is this humanitarian issue. So they are getting older, so they are over 80s or 90s. So before they are getting further older, so it is the responsibility for the government, each government authorities, to make a gathering to meet the dispersed people which break up during the Korean War. So that is the issue. So I think because of the character of the humanitarianism, it is not quite related to the issue of the denuclearization. So there is the office was opened in Kaesong last month between South and North Korea. So it is a liaison officer in Kaesong. So the people in office would work on that issue as well. So I think that in coming months we can witness some gatherings of the dispersed people in Korea. And culture, yes, BTS, Korean pop groups getting popularity. So as Mr. Paul mentioned, that it is also our pride that so non-English speaking group singers is getting popularity in the English speaking the countries, and but they are making success by themselves generally. so they are young people. So they are pursuing what they want, like. So I remember that I'm somewhat old to catch all the daily activities of our Korean pop groups, but I remember there are 7 people, and so one of the leaders who had delivered his speech in United Nations last month, he commands a very fluent English, but he was not in abroad until now. So he studied English in Korea. But he still commands a very good English. So I'm also surprised. So they teamed up, and they have some good the making, and so the leader is also producing and composing the songs. So he's a kind of a genius of the songs. So government would like to provide the environment for such talented young people go to abroad and making some their cultural or the artist the life. So there are many other Korean cultural items, but usually government is not the main sponsor or investor. Usually the Korean movies, we have some good movies, but it is the investor, private investor, who invested the Korean movies. Some of them had big hit, but some of them not. But still, so the investor rounding of investment toward the Korean cultures, that makes the ecosystem of culture, Korean culture, stronger, and could so help so other people to entertain other people. So. Korean embassy surely would like to utilize the Korean culture and to entertain the people in Trinidad and Tobago by bringing and inviting the Korean performers, whether it's a dancing team, singer team, or the Korean traditional music team. So it is our pleasure, and we will continue to do that. I think it is one way of a good way to know to the people of Trinidad and Tobago Korean culture as well. And finally, the Professor Byron, so the question of the how to parallel of the economic sanctions and the economic development in North Korea. So, so I think that the framework, general framework, the South Korean government is now taking that the inter-Korean relations should be in the framework of the global framework of the United Nations sanctions. Under that scheme, the inter-Korean relations should be proceeded. So Korea is part of the United Nations members, and is part of that the unilateral sanction countries. So there is no other way or exception for Korea to be just in the away from that regime. However, I think that because so it should be so that any inter-Korean relations now taking place, whether it is a humanitarian or the opening the office in Kaesong area, it is in good consultation with the United States and the United Nations, and we would like to obey by the instruction, the sanction system. So we will continue, but sometimes there is the different time gap, whether if the inter-Korean relations could some further. So our idea is the inter-Korean relation improvement could help contribute to denuclearize North Korea. So it is also the part of the trust building process. So if that relations, improvement relations could work for the denuclearized North Korea, that could also help the peace regime, bring over peace regime in Korean Peninsula as well.
Okay, well, I think we must say that Ambassador Moon-up's song has covered an extensive number of questions emanating from this first, the inaugural lecture for this year on the diplomatic dialogue, and we want to thank him very much for so doing. But to do so, we will ask one of our colleagues to join us. But may I also join in acknowledging the presence of Ambassador Okada, who will be giving a talk sometime shortly in the series of discussions. So I will now ask Dr. Anita Montute to say a few words of thanks. This was very good.
Thank you very much, Chair. Whenever I've stood here before at similar occasions, I've said it brings me distinct pleasure or honor. This afternoon is very different. I hate to be the one to bring an end to this very lively discussion and debate. However, I am honored to bring thanks, to express thanks on behalf of our director and the Institute of International Relations to the many persons who made this event a reality and a success. First, I would like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Moon-up Song for his very interesting presentation. From the questions and the interventions, we know that it was very good, very interesting, and thought-provoking. To Ms. Haley Kim, Senior Researcher at the Embassy of Korea, thank you very much for your contribution, the staff and the entire staff of the Embassy of the Republic of Korea, especially Ms. Shari Babalal for her support and assistance, as well as for the hospitality of the Korean Embassy for offering refreshments for this event. And here at the Institute, special thanks to our wonderful chair, Mr. Winston Dukaram, Professor of Practice at the IR, for introducing the speaker and for the wonderful job at moderating this event. To the staff of the Diplomatic Academy of the Caribbean, namely Ms. Zara Weeks, for her support with the logistical arrangements leading up to this event. The Institute's technical staff, Mr. Gerard Modest and Mr. John Maloney, and the maintenance staff of the Institute, especially Ms. Mariam Bailey, the Secretariat staff and colleagues, and finally to you, the audience, visitors, and students. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Excuse me, everybody. Just letting you know that courtesy of the Embassy of Korea, there are refreshments behind. Please help yourselves.